Every town has a most trusted man. In Wichita, Kansas, that man led his church, ran the Boy Scout troop, and enforced code violations on his own neighbors' homes. What nobody knew, for 31 years, he was going home at night to strangle families in theirs.
He terrorized a Kansas community for decades. His spree lasted from 1974 to 1991.
This is the true story of BTK. Wichita, Kansas, January 15, 1974. A cold, ordinary Tuesday morning. A teenage boy walks home from school, expecting nothing more than lunch and homework. Instead, he opens the door to a scene so horrifying that the image will haunt investigators for 3 decades. His mother, father, and 2 younger siblings, all dead, bound, strangled, hosed. There is no forced entry, no stolen valuables, no obvious motive, just 4 bodies, arranged with a precision that feels almost rehearsed. The killer didn't just murder this family. He controlled every second of their final moments, and then he walked out the front door like he had somewhere else to be. Detectives comb the scene for hours, and one detail unsettles them more than any other. The killer had cut the phone line from outside the house before he ever stepped inside. That means this wasn't a burst of sudden violence. This was a plan, rehearsed in someone's head for days, maybe weeks, before he ever touched the door handle. Whoever did this wanted total control from the very first second, and he got it. Police call it a burglary gone wrong. They are wrong, because the man who did this isn't finished. He's just getting started, and he wants the world to know it. 7 months later, he sends a letter. Not a ransom note, not a confession hidden out of guilt. A taunt, hidden inside an engineering textbook at the Wichita Public Library, addressed to a local television station, is a letter describing the murders in chilling, accurate detail. Details only the killer could know. And at the bottom, he gives himself a name he invented specifically because he wants credit. BTK, bind them, torture them, kill them. This is not a nickname the media slapped on him after the fact. This is a brand he created for himself, like a twisted business card. Because for this killer, the murders were never the whole story. The attention was the point. Think about how strange that is. Most killers who evade capture do everything possible to stay invisible. This one builds himself a logo. He wants his crimes cataloged, recognized, feared under a consistent name, as if he's building a portfolio rather than fleeing a crime scene. That single decision in 1974 tells detectives more about the mind they're hunting than any physical clue ever could. Over the next several years, BTK strikes again and again, each time selecting his victims with the same eerie deliberation.
Do you see any pattern to BTK's conduct?
We have an individual who apparently has the uncontrollable desire to kill.
April 1974, a woman alone in her home. March 1977, another woman murdered while her 3-year-old son sits in the next room, later found unharmed but forever changed. December 1977, a mother of 2. April 1979, an attempted attack that fails when the intended victim isn't home, but he leaves behind a message anyway, as if disappointment can't stop him from performing. Here's what makes this case different from almost any other serial killer in American history. BTK doesn't hide in the shadows waiting to be discovered. He inserts himself into the investigation. He sends poems. He sends word puzzles. He sends a fake autobiography of his own crimes, giving himself the codename Bill Thomas Killman, an almost cartoonish alias that spells out his own initials as a sick inside joke. He calls a local news station just to make sure his letters were received. This isn't a man running from justice. This is a man performing for an audience, and the audience is the entire city of Wichita. Then, in 1979, silence. For the next 9 years, BTK vanishes. No letters, no bodies, no warnings. The city that lived in terror begins, slowly, to breathe again. Detectives who built their careers chasing this ghost retire without ever learning his name. Task forces disband. An entire generation of Wichita children grow up hearing BTK only as a bedtime story boogeyman, a name their parents used to whisper, not a living threat. But he isn't gone. He's just waiting. Somewhere in this ordinary, unremarkable city, he is going to work every morning, mowing his lawn every weekend, sitting in a church pew every Sunday, nodding hello to neighbors on the sidewalk, while carrying a secret so monstrous that if any of them knew it, the entire fabric of that community would collapse overnight. In 1985 and again in 1986 and 1991, more women are murdered in ways investigators only later connect to the same signature, the same ligatures, the same staging, the same chilling patience. But without a new letter, without the killer announcing himself, these murders sit unsolved, uncatalogued, disconnected from the monster who committed them. BTK has learned something crucial. He doesn't need to communicate to kill. He only communicates when he wants to. And that's the detail that should terrify you most. This wasn't a man losing control of his impulses. Every murder, every letter, every silence. It was a choice, a calculated, patient, decades-long exercise in control. Along the way, an entire dedicated task force is built around this single case. Detectives who spend their careers, and in some cases their entire working lives, chasing a man who never leaves fingerprints, never leaves witnesses, and never makes the same mistake twice. They interview thousands of suspects. They collect DNA samples from local men in a desperate, sweeping effort to find a match. They consult psychological profilers who insist the killer must be organized, intelligent, likely married, likely holding down a stable job. Someone who blends in so completely that he'll never stand out in a lineup of suspects. They are right about almost everything, and it still isn't enough, because profiling can narrow a description. It can't hand detectives a name. Then, in 2004, 30 years after that first family was found bound and strangled in their living room, a local newspaper publishes an anniversary piece about the unsolved BTK murders. And somewhere in Wichita, a man reads it, and he feels forgotten. He can't stand it. 3 decades of silence, and the one thing he cannot survive is being forgotten. Not guilt, not fear of capture, just the unbearable thought that the city has moved on without him, that somewhere out there people are living their lives without thinking about him at all. Weeks later, a package arrives at the Wichita Eagle. Inside, a photocopy of a woman's driver's license and a chilling recreation of one of his earliest murders, using details never released to the public. BTK is back, not because he wants to kill again, though he will threaten to, but because he cannot tolerate being irrelevant. After a decade of silence, his own ego is what brings him out of hiding. This is where the story turns into a cat-and-mouse game unlike anything police have handled before, because now, BTK starts communicating constantly. Cereal boxes left on the side of the road with coded messages inside, packages mailed to television stations, word puzzles built entirely from cut-out newspaper letters. He is toying with detectives, and he knows it. He even sends a letter directly asking police a question that will ultimately be his undoing. He asks, "If I send you a floppy disk, can it be traced back to me?" It's an almost unbelievable moment. A man who has evaded identification for 31 years, who has outsmarted an entire police task force, who has read every book on forensic science he could find, is asking the very people hunting him for permission to hand them the evidence that will end everything. Investigators, working with a local television station, publicly and dishonestly answer no. It's a lie. And BTK, a man who spent 30 years outsmarting an entire police department, believes them. His need to communicate, his hunger for recognition, has finally overridden his instinct for self-preservation. In February 2005, a purple floppy disk arrives at Wichita's KSAS TV station. On it, a Microsoft Word document. Detectives immediately dig into the file's metadata, the hidden digital fingerprint every document carries. Buried inside, they find a deleted file reference reading Christ Lutheran Church, along with a username, Dennis. It takes investigators less than 48 hours to connect that name to a real person, Dennis Rader, 59 years old, president of the church council at Christ Lutheran Church, a Cub Scout leader, a married father of two, a city compliance officer, the man literally responsible for enforcing code violations on his neighbors' homes and yards. He was not a drifter. He was not a loner living on the edge of society. He was the guy who showed up to city council meetings, the guy who volunteered, the guy neighbors described using the exact same word over and over in every single interview afterward. Normal. When news breaks across Wichita, the reaction isn't just shock. It's a very specific, very personal kind of horror. People realize they had waved at this man in the grocery store, shaken his hand at church potlucks, let their children take his Cub Scout badge tests. For 31 years, an entire community had unknowingly welcomed a serial killer into every corner of their daily lives, and not one of them ever saw it coming, because he made absolutely sure of that. On February 25th, 2005, police pull Dennis Rader over during his drive to work and arrest him without incident. No standoff, no chase. Just a quiet procedural end to one of the most agonizing manhunts in American criminal history. And here is the detail that turns your stomach the most. During his interrogation, Rader doesn't break down. He doesn't cry. He describes his murders, 10 confirmed victims in total, with the emotional register of a man discussing a home improvement project. He talks about projects and hits. He explains almost proudly how he selected victims, how he stalked them for days or weeks beforehand, how he built hit kits containing rope, tape, and restraints that he kept hidden for future use. He describes killing children in the same flat tone he uses to describe killing adults. He later tells investigators he believes a demon living inside him committed the murders, not him. A convenient narrative for a man who spent 3 decades meticulously planning, documenting, and savoring every detail of what that demon supposedly did without his permission. In court, Rader pleads guilty to all 10 murders, sparing the families a trial, at least in the technical sense, but he does not spare them his voice, and in many ways, forcing them to sit through his testimony is crueler than any trial could have been. During sentencing, he reads a rambling, self-indulgent statement describing his crimes in explicit clinical detail, seemingly savoring his final moment in the spotlight. Families of his victims sit in that courtroom forced to listen to the man who destroyed their lives narrate their loved ones' final moments like a proud craftsman describing his work. He is sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, 175 years, because Kansas did not have the death penalty at the time of his first murders. He will die in prison, but even behind bars, he continues seeking attention, corresponding with true crime authors, giving interviews, drawing crude illustrations of potential future victims he says he considered, but never acted on. What makes Dennis Rader uniquely disturbing isn't just the body count. Other killers have claimed more victims. What makes him uniquely disturbing is the mask. For 31 years, he lived an entirely unremarkable, aggressively normal life, directly among the people he hunted. He served on his church council while hiding hit kits in his home. He raised his own children while stalking other families. He enforced city ordinances on his neighbors' fences while planning how to break into their houses. The horror of BTK was never really about what he did in those final terrifying minutes with his victims. It was about the decades he spent walking past all of us, completely unnoticed, hiding in plain sight, waiting. Investigators who worked the case for decades later admitted something unsettling. Rader wasn't caught because of brilliant detective work in the traditional sense. He wasn't caught because a fingerprint finally matched, or a witness finally came forward. He was caught because, after 31 years of perfect discipline, his own vanity finally cracked. He needed the world to know who BTK was more than he needed to stay free. In the end, the same hunger for recognition that let him hide in plain sight for 3 decades is exactly what handed detectives his name. And that's the question that should keep you up tonight. Not, how did he get away with it for so long? It's this. How many people like him are out there right now, sitting in a church pew, mowing a lawn, waving to a neighbor, still waiting for their own moment in the spotlight?